We're almost at the All-Star break, and as always, that means it's time to talk about trades. And the Sixers are in a really good spot right now. They are the first seed, but there are things that need to be improved, and these are some targets that I wanted to talk about. Some of them I do really like, some of them I don't, but they're names that have been brought up a lot and that are genuinely possible. So let's get into it. The first name that has a lot of Sixers fans excited is Kyle Lowry from the Raptors. But personally, I just don't see it. It's really something that I feel like I'm alone here. I feel like I'm the only one who feels this way, but I just don't really see how he fits with this team. Mainly from the standpoint of even just think about the starting lineup. It's a little bit strange of where he would go, but of course, it doesn't really matter. The Sixers are very kind of positionless anyway to begin with. So I do get that, but I just don't know if I love it, and it would take the most out of any of these targets I'm going to talk about today to get him. I'll put up some potential trades on screen, but overall they're all going to be around the same. It's going to have to include Danny Green, and that's really no disrespect to him, but he is the most likely starter to get traded, mainly because of his contract. $15 million, that's going to be able to match almost anyone. And the Sixers have no other contracts that big that could match people, obviously, other than the players that they don't want to trade. Any deal for a guy making $20 million a year is going to be Danny, Mike Scott. That's what you're going to see over and over. That's really all we have contract-wise to trade. And the Kyle Lowry idea really got started when the Raptors were really, really bad. And it seemed like an obvious choice for him to get traded. But the Raptors have really been playing better recently. They're, I think, over 500 now. They're very much in the playoff race in the East. And I just don't think that they necessarily are going to want to trade him as much as they might have a month ago. And overall, I do think it will come down to if Lowry himself asks for a trade. I think if he does, the Raptors will give him his request because he has earned that respect. But I just think as of right now, I don't think the Raptors even want to trade him, which means it's going to be a lot harder to get him than anyone else I'm going to talk about today. And I just don't love the idea enough to want to do that, especially with him being a free agent coming up. Yes, we will have some money in the summer, but barely any. And I saw a report that Lowry wants to still be getting paid $30 million a year. I don't think that's going to happen, but it certainly won't happen here because we cannot do that, even if we wanted to. And overall, I really do like Lowry. I respect him a lot. I just don't love this idea. As much as I try to think about it, talk myself into it, I just can't right now. I really can't. And I feel like that's an unpopular opinion, but that's how I feel about this potential trade. Another name that's been in my mind ever since he got traded to Houston was Victor Oladipo. Obviously, he has no future there. I don't even know why the Rockets took him. I think they would have been way better off with, obviously, Ben Simmons or just taking LeVert and Jared Allen. I don't know why they took Oladipo. I really don't. He clearly has no intention of ever staying there. He just turned down a contract extension from them. Not really surprising, though. It wasn't long-term, so I don't really think he would have taken a long-term one anyway, though, from them. And once again, this is just going to be a straight-up Danny Green for him. Not straight up, but as in the lineup. It's very simple to think about. You just take out Danny, put in Oladipo, and we're a lot better. Oladipo is a really good defender still. He is obviously not going to score, 25 points a game. And he's obviously not an all-star anymore, but he wouldn't have to be here. He would just be, really a third or fourth option, and so I think that would be good. It should be noted that any Sixers fan hoping for a long-term option, definitely do not look at Oladipo because Oladipo feels like he's already a Miami Heat. I don't know why. It just feels like he's obsessed with that team, and he obviously wants to be there. So if you're a Sixers fan who doesn't feel like losing another player to the Heat, you probably don't want to make this trade. But personally, I really do like it. I think it really does put us at a completely different level. It's a simple fit, no complications. I think he's obviously attainable. He's basically guaranteed to get traded. especially after turning down that contract extension. So this is one that I really, really like. But there is one other option who I think would be even easier to get and might even have a higher chance of staying. And that player is Evan Fournier. So this is one that I actually just talked myself into like a couple minutes ago. Some people had mentioned this to me before, and I just didn't really like it. For some reason, I had a pretty bad idea of Evan Fournier and what he is. But overall, I think a lot of his issues is that the Magic ask him to do way too much, especially now with all their injuries. And I think in a role that he would have on the Sixers, he'd be much, much better. I don't think he'd be hard to get at all. Once again, just going to be Danny Green's contract and a pick, probably. I think that's all it would take. He's going to be a free agent at the end of the year, so you don't have to worry about any money holds-ups. But at the same time, I think he could actually stay. And for me, it's something that I'm looking for. You're going to notice I don't want a lot of money locked up long term. One of the best parts about the Horford move that got us Danny Green in the first place is that his contract will be gone at the end of the year, and we will have some money freed up. And so I don't really want to trade Danny for someone who's going to give us money for the future, and we won't have any of that free money, unless of course it was for like a star player that you wouldn't mind paying. But if we're trading for a role player, I would rather just have the money freed at that point, unless you have to say that player is significantly better than Danny Green if you want to commit to money like that. I don't want short-term little improvements and then we're locked into money. That's just not what I'm looking for right now. But anyway, back to Evan Fournier. He's a really, really solid player. And like I said, I think he looks worse because of the team he's on. And I think on this team, where he's being asked to do way less, I think you could really see a big improvement from him. He's averaging 18 points this year, which is way more than I thought. Like I said, I had a totally wrong interpretation of him. And obviously he will not average 18 points here. But he could easily average 15 and really space the floor. He's a good passer. He's a much better shot creator for himself than Danny Green is, like way better. And this is really a move that I've fallen in love with, and I really, really would love to see happen. Probably out of everyone here, this is, in terms of if we were talking about changing the starting lineup, this is probably the one I want to make the most. Now we're going to look more so at the bench. I'm really conflicted on what I think about the Sixers starting lineup. There are nights where it seems absolutely perfect. The floor is spaced perfectly. Everyone's playing great. There are other nights where Danny Green just really frustrates me. There are some nights where Seth Curry just can't hit a shot, and that's probably why he's been a bench player most of his career. He's a little bit inconsistent. I absolutely am not trading Seth Curry, though. His contract is perfect. Though the worst that could happen to Seth Curry is a specific trade might push him to the bench as a sixth man, but overall, that contract is way too perfect. I'm not trading that contract for basically any other role player in the entire league. So anyways, let's assume we want to keep the starting lineup exactly the same. Let's look at the bench targets. So first up, we will have a name that Sixers fans will recognize, Nemanja Bjelica. Yes, I did spend the time learning how to say his name a couple years back when he said he was going to sign with the Sixers, then said, never mind, I want to go back to Europe, and a couple days later signs with the Kings. So it would be a little bit awkward to trade for him, but he has said it was nothing personal. He basically just agreed to the Sixers deal way too quick and then got offered more money. So it's nothing personal. And plus, the entire organization was completely different back then, so it's not really a big deal. It's just kind of funny. But Nemanja Bjelica is a really interesting option. He's a stretch four, which the Sixers really, really need. They absolutely need a backup power forward. That is probably the biggest need of the team, unless you really, really hate Danny Green, which some games I can completely understand that. And Nemanja Bjelica is a really good option as a backup four. He would remind me most of Ersan Ilyasova and the role that he played on the team a couple years ago as the backup four. I'm not exactly sure what it would take to get him. I wouldn't think almost anything, but he has been playing a little bit more recently, which is unfortunate because before he basically wasn't playing at all, which would guarantee you could get him for almost nothing. Now he's actually playing, and he's playing pretty well. The Kings are an absolute joke this year, as always, but he's been playing pretty well, and I just think he's a perfect backup stretch four. He would be great in lineups with Ben, and this is a target that the Sixers should definitely look at. When we look at the Sixers bench, we mentioned that the biggest issue is the backup power forward position, but the second biggest issue is backup point guard. So they have Shake Milton, and he's a really, really good player, but he's really just a scorer, and he's not really even meant to be a point guard. He kind of just is one because we don't really have any other better option. He really only scores, which is perfectly fine. I have no problem with that, but the issue is that if he's not hitting every shot, the bench units basically have no offense at all, and they have no one who can facilitate the ball well enough. The only other player on the bench who could play as a backup point guard is Tyrese Maxey, and unfortunately he's really showing his youth in the past month or so. Ever since his game against the Nuggets when we had 7 players, he's really looked not great at all, and he's just not ready, which is fine. He's very young, but he's just not ready right now, and it's caused Shake to have to basically pretend to be a point guard. And it'd be a lot better to have a pure point guard, and that's why I'm looking at George Hill from the Thunder. George Hill has been so good the last couple years. It's actually pretty crazy. I'm honestly surprised the Bucks even were willing to trade him. I know they got Jrue Holiday, but I'm just surprised, honestly, that they gave him up because he's been insanely good. I believe he is hurt right now. I don't actually know what happened. I'm not sure how long he's out. Obviously, that does matter. Let me look that up actually right now. So George Hill got thumb surgery on around the beginning of February, and he was out 4 weeks. So he should be coming back sometime soon, certainly after the All-Star break, I would imagine. So I'm not too concerned about that. And I think he's a really, really good target. Now, he is the only player I've mentioned so far that actually will have a contract going into next year, and he's getting paid $10 million next year, around that. So that's kind of a lot. I don't really love that, but I do think he is a good enough player that he's worth that. I genuinely do, and it would really, really help our bench to have him and Shake at the same time, as opposed to just Shake pretending to be a point guard, and I think Shake would realize how much easier it is too, playing with someone like George Hill. And overall, I would imagine he's available because it's the Thunder. They've said Woj says they're sellers. Where no one's surprised to hear that. I think a lot of people will have interest in him, so it could be difficult to get him. But overall, we know the Thunder love picks, and we know Daryl Morey loves giving up picks. So it seems like a match made in heaven here. And for the final bench target, we're going back to power forward, and this is a very popular one that has lost some steam recently, and that is PJ Tucker. So everyone was talking about PJ Tucker because back during the Harden sweepstakes, the dream was to get Harden and PJ Tucker at the same time. The Rockets weren't really interested in doing that. They weren't interested in trading Harden to the Sixers at all, so that was really never an option. And PJ Tucker would be perfect as a backup for, in theory, great defender. He can stretch the floor just like Bjelica. Obviously, a little bit less athletic than Bjelica, I would say, although neither are incredible. And PJ Tucker seemed like a no-brainer for me, but he's really, really struggling this year. Really, really bad. Not a little bit worse than usual, but awful. And I will give him some slack because the team he's on is really, really bad. And obviously, it makes sense that his numbers will dip. When you're playing with James Harden and Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook, you're going to get a lot more open looks than the team he's playing with now. I mean, I think that's understandable. Also, he's had kind of a weird role because Christian Wood really kind of took his spot at times, and it's just a really awkward team in general. But the thing is, it's not that his numbers have dipped a little, it's that they've dipped a lot. I'm pretty sure statistically he is one of the worst offensive players in the league this year, and that is scary. And realistically, my biggest issue here that's come up is the fact that he just can't create his own shot at all. And we already knew this, but it's become much clearer now that he's playing with a worse team that he cannot create for himself even a little bit. And so honestly, does he really solve any problems that the Sixers bench is having? Their whole issue is that they can't create any shots. So what is PJ Tucker really going to do? Think of it this way. Is he that much better for that bench unit than Mike Scott to be worth giving up assets? I think he is much better than Mike Scott, especially defensively. But if he's not going to be able to create any shot for himself, you have to wonder if it's worth giving up the assets that the Houston Rockets may want. I don't necessarily know what they want, but with the way PJ Tucker's playing, I don't really want to give up more than like a second. Probably like Mike Scott in a second. That's really all I want to do. Personally, maybe that's low, but the way he's been playing has just really turned me off recently. And so overall, I would still like to see it happen because I do believe PJ Tucker could up his play, especially with a guy like Ben Simmons, getting him open shots. But I'm a little cautious of this one. So that's going to be all from me today. I love the trade deadline. I'm very excited, although I do expect this one to be a bit of a chill one. Woj recently said that there were only a couple teams he would consider to be sellers. A big reason for that is the play-in tournament. So if a team is the 11th seed, usually it would seem like their season is basically over, but now not necessarily. Even though I think the deadline will be kind of slow, I would bet a lot of money that the Sixers make a trade. There is no chance that they don't do something. And I think all of these targets, whether it's the 3 starters I mentioned or the 3 bench players, I think they would all be very, very good targets for this team. Thank you for watching.